Veronica Ann Thornton was born in approximately 1945 in England. She was known to everyone who loved her as Carole. 1945 was the year the Second World War finally ended. The year that 6 years of global devastation drew to a close, and Britain, battered and exhausted, began the long process of rebuilding itself. It was a year of profound relief and profound grief in equal measure. Families were reunited, and families were shattered by the news that the men they had waited for were never coming home. A new government swept to power on a wave of hope. A welfare state was being built. A national health service would follow, and for the first time in a generation, ordinary British people felt that the country was reaching towards something better for everyone, not just the few. It was into this world, recovering, hopeful, and shaped by the memory of what war had done, that Carole came into the world. Bournemouth is a seaside resort town on the south coast of England in Dorset. A place of wide, sandy beaches, a grand Victorian pier, and the genteel, comfortable respectability that has always defined it. It is not a place associated with darkness. It is a place where families go on holiday, where retired couples settle by the sea, where the air smells of salt and sunscreen, and the streets are lined with the kind of detached houses that speak of solidly middle-class ambition. It was into this Bournemouth that Carole and her husband eventually settled, into a large, detached house on Ipswich Road. With a sports car in the driveway, and Rolex watches on their wrists, and the outward appearance of a couple who had done very well for themselves. Carole was, by every account of those who knew her, a proper lady, the words her daughter Sam used to describe her. She was quiet and reserved. She was always immaculately presented. She worked as an engineer in the aviation industry. She was a woman who took pride in herself and in the home she kept. She had married her husband Russell in June 1965. They had one daughter together, Samantha, known as Sam, and they had built, from the outside at least, the kind of life that looked like everything a family in 1960s and 70s Britain was supposed to aspire to. Russell Causley, born Packman, a name he would later discard, was a very different kind of person from the woman he had married. He was an extrovert where she was reserved. He was loud where she was quiet. He was arrogant, full of self-importance, and he loved control. Over his wife, over his household, over the people around him. He worked alongside Carole in the aviation industry. He had been having affairs throughout the marriage. Sam had witnessed him with another woman when she was still a young child. When Sam once revealed this to her mother, Russell turned on Sam in fury and abused her aggressively. He frequently kicked Carole. He subjected her to sustained physical and psychological abuse across the years of their marriage. The affluent lifestyle they presented to the world, the sports car, the Rolex watches, the trips abroad, was, beneath the surface, built on financial strain and held together by a woman who was enduring a great deal more than anyone outside the house was permitted to see. In 1984, 15 months before Carole would disappear, Russell invited a 26-year-old colleague named Patricia Causley to move into the family home as a lodger after she sold her flat. Patricia had already been in a relationship with Russell. She moved in under the same roof as his wife and his teenage daughter and continued that relationship with a brazenness that barely troubled Russell at all. In time, Russell would take Patricia's surname as his own. He became Russell Causley. The man Carole had married, the man she was still living with, still enduring, was now wearing another woman's name. 1985, in Bournemouth and across Britain, was a year of enormous social tension. The miners' strike, which had begun in March of 1984, finally collapsed in March of 1985 after a full year of the most bitter industrial confrontation the country had seen since the general strike. Communities across the north of England, Wales, and Scotland were devastated by its defeat. In the south, in Bournemouth, in the prosperous seaside towns of Dorset, the strike felt distant, something happening to other people in other places. The south of England, in 1985, was Thatcher's Britain at its most confident. Property prices rising, the financial sector booming, the language of aspiration everywhere. For Carole Packman, living in a large house on Ipswich Road with a man who was abusing her and conducting an open affair with a woman installed in her own home, none of that confidence was available to her. She had begun quietly and privately to look for a way out. The day before she disappeared, Carole visited a solicitor in Bournemouth to inquire about a divorce. She was 40 years old. She'd been married for 20 years. She had endured abuse and infidelity and humiliation. She was finally asking what it would take to be free. The following morning, in June 1985, Carole Packman was gone. When Sam came home, she found a note and her mother's wedding ring. The note said that Carole had had enough, that she was leaving, and that she would not be coming back. Sam ran upstairs to her parents' room. Russell stood and watched her. Sam looked at her mother's belongings, all of them untouched, exactly as they had always been, every item still in its place. Russell said confidently, "She'll be back." Sam was 16 years old. She believed him. For years afterwards, she believed that her mother had simply walked out. Weeks after Carole disappeared, Sam filed a formal missing person report with Bournemouth police. No communication came from Carole, no bank withdrawals, no contact with friends or family or former colleagues, no medical or dental records, nothing. Russell told people who asked that Carole had left with a man driving a red Porsche. He retained custody of Sam and continued raising her in the family home on Ipswich Road while Patricia lived alongside them. The police investigation was hampered almost immediately by what would later be described as a major mistake. A woman turned up at a police station claiming to be Carole Packman and saying she was safe and that the family should stop searching for her. The police accepted this at face value. They did not carry out basic identity checks. They closed the case. Detectives involved in the original inquiry later admitted the force had made a significant error, and that they now believed the woman at the police station had not been Carole at all. A paper trail led investigators briefly to Canada. Nothing conclusive was found. The years passed. Sam grew up and had a son of her own, Neil, and built a life in Northamptonshire, and lived with the story that her mother had left by choice and tried to make peace with something that could never quite be settled. Then, in 1993, the story broke open. 8 years after Carole's disappearance, Russell Causley faked his own death. He staged a boating accident off the coast of Guernsey and disappeared, assuming a new identity and planning to claim £790,000 in life insurance. The fraud was discovered. He was arrested, brought back, and convicted of fraud in 1995. While he was in prison serving that sentence, he began talking to fellow inmates. He told them he had murdered Carole. He told them he had strangled her during an argument. He told them he had burned her body on a bonfire in the garden of the house on Ipswich Road. a fire that had lasted 3 or 4 days. Those jailhouse confessions led to Russell being charged with Carole's murder on the 6th of February 1996. The trial took place at Winchester Crown Court. The prosecution had no body and no physical evidence of the crime. They had Russell's admissions, the confessions to fellow inmates, the initial statement to police in which he described strangling Carole during an argument. And they had the evidence of a woman who had vanished without any trace that she was still alive anywhere in the world. The jury convicted him. He was sentenced to life imprisonment. Russell immediately began changing his account. In addition to claiming he had strangled Carole, he had also told inmates he had gassed her with a plastic bag. He had claimed the burning of her body. Now he began the long process of revision and contradiction that would define the decades to come. In June 2003, the Court of Appeal quashed his conviction due to concerns about the reliability of the informant witnesses who had testified about his jailhouse confessions. He was retried in 2004. He was again found guilty. He received a life sentence with a minimum term of 16 years, making him eligible for parole from 2012. The parole process that followed became a decade-long source of anguish for Sam Gillingham and her son Neil. Russell had been changing his story since the moment he began talking about what he had done. At the parole hearing, held in December 2022, which made legal history as the first parole hearing ever held in public in the United Kingdom, Russell told the 3-person panel, which included former Judge Nick Coleman, that it was in fact his mistress, Patricia Causley, who had strangled Carole. He said his own role had been limited to burning the body afterwards. He admitted, under questioning, that he was a proven, habitual, cold and consummate liar, but insisted that at this particular hearing, he was telling the truth. Police had investigated Patricia Causley and found no credible evidence against her. She was never charged. Sam and members of the public watched the proceedings via video link at a government building in East London. Russell gave evidence for more than 3 hours. The panel chair ruled that Russell should not be visible to the public as he testified. Russell had by this point already been released once, in 2020, and had been recalled to prison in 2021 for breaching his license conditions by failing to attend and engage with his probation supervision. The family said he should never have been released in the first place. In January 2023, the parole board concluded, after examining more than 600 pages of material, that Russell should be released again. The board described him as a self-confessed liar, but said he posed a minimal risk of repeat offending. He left prison in February 2023, subject to strict license conditions including requirements about where he lived, restrictions on his movements, and controls on who he could contact. Sam described the parole process as a tick box exercise. She said of course he was going to get released. She said it is what it is and there is nothing I can do about it. She said she still hoped to meet her father after decades of asking, to confront him about what he had done to her mother. Neil Gillingham spoke for the family's anguish. He said, "Russell Causley is an evil and calculating killer who should not be allowed to be released while he so arrogantly refuses to say what he did with my grandmother's body." He said, "The sense of injustice is absolutely huge." He said, "The psychological trauma we have had to endure is beyond comprehension." He said, You have to ask yourself, who is it who is actually serving the sentence? Sam and the family campaigned publicly for a change in the law, what became known as the No Body, No Parole campaign, arguing that murderers who had not revealed the whereabouts of their victim's body should not be eligible for release. The campaign drew widespread public support. Justice Secretary Dominic Raab said he was looking at whether to challenge Russell's release. The Ministry of Justice concluded there were no grounds to ask the parole board to reconsider. Russell Causley walked out of prison in February 2023. He is subject to license conditions for the rest of his life and can be recalled if he breaches them. Sam Gillingham grew up believing her mother had chosen to leave her. She spent the rest of her life learning the truth and fighting for justice and waiting, as she is still waiting, to know where her mother is buried. Hello everyone, thank you for listening and drop any feedback below. I would love to hear your thoughts and hope to see you again right here on Cold Case UK.